Hey, so I haven't been filming for a little while just because I've been having a diva break. Trying to get my life together still. I wanted to come in and talk about the new memoir by Mariah Carey. So I am a big Mariah Carey fan. I have a Mariah Carey poster from her Butterfly album era, and I went to see her All I Want for Christmas Is You tour in 2017, and I saw that in Manchester, and it actually snowed for a little bit on that actual night, so it was awesome being there, even though the show was a bit of a mess, but her singing was still on point, so it was still like an amazing show. She recently came out with this memoir, literally this month, I think it came out, and I pre-ordered it because as soon as I saw this, I was like, oh, because she's never done anything quite like this. She's not the sort of musical artist who has like loads of biographies that, you know, the type of like shitty biographies you see in W.H. Smith, where it's like Sharon Osbourne, My Life with Ozzy, like shit like that. I didn't think that this would be the usual run of the mill celebrity autobiography stuff because she's waited like 30 years more or less to write a book like this. And this book did deliver. So when I saw the book cover, I wasn't that sold on it. Like, I mean, she looks lovely on it, obviously. But I mean, the smile is kind of like an awkward kind of smile, I think. I can kind of understand that after reading it with the subject matter of the book, but I thought, you know, really they could have done a better cover because if I saw this in Waterstones or something, I would be like, oh, that's a book for fans. I mean, I'm a fan, so that's okay. But if I wasn't a fan, I would completely pass this book by. And the picture on the back is one of the childhood pictures of her on the beach. That kind of picture, kind of misery memoir childhood picture, is more of what this book is. I mean, it's not really a misery memoir by any stretch, but a lot of the subject matter of her growing up is really tragic, and I was really shocked at just how tragic it was. I knew that she was mixed race, but I didn't realize how kind of traumatic some of the stuff that happened in her childhood were. So overall, I did love this book. Yeah. What I love about this book is that I do feel like I know Mariah Carey a lot more than I did. You can tell that it's not just a cheap money grab kind of biography. The font's quite small and it is like 330 pages, so it's not like tiny. It's a decent length. I read it in a week because I haven't been reading that much lately. It was a really good read, particularly the scenes focusing on her childhood and growing up and her marriage with Tommy Mottola. They were so beautifully rendered. I was really surprised at the amount she could recall. When I was reading that, I was like, wow, this reads like a novel almost. The only thing I felt a little bit left down by was maybe the last like 50 pages or so. I mean, there was a Divas chapter that I liked, but overall, the last 50 pages, it felt like she was trying to do a little neat bow tie on her life. And I just didn't believe that. The book mainly focused on her growing up, her early career. And then by the time it got to her talking about her life, probably 2010 onwards, it was quite sketchy. It just felt like she didn't quite know how to frame it because the whole kind of narrative of the book is that she's had this rags to riches real life Cinderella tale where she started literally from nothing. Like her family was highly dysfunctional and they didn't really have anything, and she just had this amazing voice and she was really driven and she wrote all her own songs. And I don't think she quite knew how to talk about the issues in her life that have happened since she got really famous, because I think with the story it would kind of feel like, but I'm so rich and I've got all this privilege, and it would still feel like, not that she's complaining, but that I think maybe she was worried that people wouldn't understand that she still has loads of issues. Or maybe she feels like she doesn't have any issues anymore. I don't know. Yeah, but let's break down some of the subject matter in this book. Right, so it starts off with her childhood, and I knew a little bit about her family. Like, I knew she had a white mother and a black father, and that her sister was like a really sketchy person. Like, her sister has sold like shitty stories to trashy media outlets, and her I didn't even know she had a brother. So when I was reading about that, I was like, oh, for the first like 150 pages, she actually really went into her family history, and like her grandmother was known as a kind of prophetess in Harlem and had her own church until, was it the police just shut the church down one day? Some of her family stuff literally reads like a soap opera. I'm talking about highly dramatic scenes. I was really shocked at how abusive her childhood was. Honestly, like, even for someone who's had a really lovely childhood, to have the kind of success she has is an amazing feat. But to come from such a disadvantaged background and still manage to have the kind of crazy success she's had is, honestly, it's phenomenal. I feel like in some ways I understand her better than she understands herself based on this book. Some of the scenes with her sister growing up, they're really, really harrowing. Her sister's older than her, but her sister was really off the rails. And from when Mariah was born, like, her sister was like doing a lot for like a young girl. She would just rock up to the house and just cause absolute chaos, and Mariah would never know what was going to happen. And it seems like the whole way through their lives, it's been like that. There's one scary scene where her sister Alison tried to pimp her out to this, like, her pimp, when Mariah was only like 13 or 14. There's a scene where Mariah's only like 12 and her sister is like, here's some coke, do you want to try it? And Mariah's like, no thanks. Things could have gone really, really bad for Mariah Carey if she hadn't said no to drugs. I'm guessing. Yeah. And then, so this older guy that her sister was seeing, who was her pimp, basically, one time he was just driving Mariah Carey alone in the car when she was maybe like 14. And then he tried to come on to her and have sex with her in the car. And Mariah was like, like, when I was reading it like, oh my God, what's going to happen? No, no, no. And then some old guy turns up in a car, like, just next to them. And then the pimp is like, oh shit, I'm going to get caught, so let's stop. One thing that I thought was really heartwarming about this book is that Mariah Carey never forgot to thank the people in her life that have saved her or really given her beautiful moments. It was kind of like it didn't want sympathy from you, and that it was kind of saying that if you've had trauma, hopefully it's not the end of the world for you. And then the next part of the book goes on to discuss how her music career started off. And I love that she revealed a little bit about her writing techniques and her singing techniques. Hearing about how she wrote some of the songs I love felt really special. So I'm so glad that she published the book just to kind of read those. Throughout, there are a lot of song lyrics, but I think by about page 70, it became a bit like in The Lord of the Rings, where there's all these, songs the hobbits sing and the elves sing and the dwarves sing, and it's quite repetitive. When I hear song lyrics like, "'Cause there's a light in me that shines brightly, they can try, but they can't take that away from me." Like, she says the song it comes from, but I'm like, yeah, that sounds nice in the song, but when you just have that on its own, like, it's kind of cringy. So I got quite tired of that quite quickly, but, it is Mariah Carey, so I could forgive that. But fans will probably like that. Her fans are also known as lambs, or the Lamely, so I guess I am a lamb, but I'm not, like, well, I love Mariah Carey, but I'm not mega obsessed with her. Like some of the fans are, like they have like all her merch. So I have some of her merch. You'll see more of my merch when it's Christmas. And I have this Mariah Carey sweater that I got. This is actually a fan made one, but I love this sweater. But some of the fans have like some of the crazy stuff that she has. Like Wendy Williams, the American talk show host, the little guy that sits on the side who has a little mic, and if she's saying a bit of gossip, if it's like factually incorrect or something, he'll chime in and be like, no, Wendy, Mariah didn't go to that restaurant, she went to this restaurant. He is a huge Mariah Carey fan. Norman is his name. And he has like Mariah Carey's butterfly water and cushions and stuff like that. Like I don't have all that stuff.
Now, Norman there at the podium is a 100% lamb. Have you ever been to his office? Suzanne, you know.
Yes, he's got a whole case of that Mariah Carey water.
She makes water?
Yes, some weird water potion something on his
What
back.
is going on?
Butterfly water.
Butterfly. All right, but the posters, he's like a schoolgirl over Mariah. Posters, pillowcases, water. Well, I took a picture of it. What the Mariah Carey is going on, he's obsessed.
Like that's a bit much for me, but I have, a few things is lush. My favourite chapter in this book was probably a chapter called Divas, where she was talking about how she's sang with Whitney Houston and Aretha Franklin, and all that stuff I found really brilliant. There was one particular chapter as well where she was shading Jennifer Lopez even more, so that was a bit cheeky. There was this whole thing in the early 2000s. She'd been writing this song for her Butterfly album, and then somehow over that summer, she heard like part of the song on a Jennifer Lopez track, and then since then she's basically hated Jennifer Lopez. I mean, she probably doesn't hate her, but she kind of shades her every chance she gets.
How did a melody that she had locked down over the summer, last summer, suddenly appear on Jennifer Lopez's album? This was something that really bothered her.
Remember when Mariah famously threw shade at Jennifer 14 years ago when she was asked about Beyonce? Mariah said, oh my gosh, she's beautiful, she's talented, she's gorgeous, she's all that. And then the same reporter said, and what about Jennifer Lopez? And that's when Mariah famously said, I don't know her.
She does say that.
Yeah, she does.
She's forgetful, I guess.
Yes.
What do you think about people still referencing I don't know her all these years later?
I still don't know her.
There are rivalries, but I don't think she has anything to do with me. I mean, my whole thing is singing, writing songs. Yeah, and I've been doing this, my whole life. Singing is first and foremost. It's a God-given talent that I'm grateful for. Her thing is something different. One thing I do know is that music has always been very closely linked to spirituality for me. And I know that without it, I never would have gotten through any situation in my life. And I'm just grateful to God for giving me this gift.
There's a lot of fanfare about that. So there was a little bit more of that in that book, but she never said Jennifer Lopez's name. So, but I mean, I hadn't expected her to say her name because she never says her name. It was fun. I had been hoping for some Nicki Minaj shade because when they were on American Idol together as judges, they just hated each other.
It was like hell, going to work every day in hell with Satan.
And they made no secret of that. So I had been hoping for some Nicki Minaj talk or something like that, or maybe a chapter on when she was an American Idol judge, but that never came.
She disses people. It's nasty the way she treats Jennifer.
So yeah, the second part of the memoir focuses on her getting into the music business and her marriage with Tommy Mottola. And she got married to Tommy Mottola when she was quite young. I think she was like 23 or maybe something about that age. And she talks about how, he was head of Sony. He was like 28 years older than her, and how it was a really dysfunctional relationship. She basically just carried on the dysfunction she'd seen in her family through that marriage. So that was quite sad because it wasn't just that Tommy Mottola was older and richer. He was head of the music company she was with. So when she talks about going through the divorce, like I could just tell that it must have been so messy and stressful. Some of the scenes she writes about with that marriage are, if you've like experienced domestic abuse, they might be really triggering. Let me read you this. One evening, I was working with two men I had a significant creative and professional relationship with, whose duty it was to have mob-like loyalty to Tommy. These three men, to whose wealth and prominence I had contributed considerably, and I was sitting in the kitchen about to have a meal break. Even though we were all friends, sitting around the table facing a large, rustic fireplace with the now sadly ironic phrase "storybook manor" etched in the limestone mantel, I named it that, desperately believing I could wish and will my nightmare into a fairy tale. She means that the house she built with Tommy Mottola was called Storybook Manor. So it was like this, Michael Jackson style palatial Disney home. But she ends up calling it Sing Sing, which is like the prison you can see from the top of it. So that was quite funny. But anyway, the atmosphere was anything but warm. It was cold, quiet, and pungent with pain and conflict, evidence to all that a dynamic in me had shifted. I think it embarrassed Tommy that he had lost control and lost his woman in front of his boys. Embarrassment enraged him. He began an awkward and creepy little rant about the beautiful car he had just given me and our fabulous estate, which I designed and half-financed, and how in spite of all of it, I wanted to leave him. I was sitting still, looking down at the table, when Tommy walked over and picked up the butter knife from the place setting in front of me. He pressed the flat side of it against my right cheek. Every muscle in my face clenched. My entire body locked in place, my lungs stiffened. Tommy held the knife there. His boys watched and didn't say a word. After what seemed like forever, he slowly dragged the thin, cool strip of metal down my burning face. I was searing with rage from the excruciating humiliation of his terrifying, cowardly performance in my kitchen, in front of my colleagues. I was locked away in the bathroom, which now felt like a mausoleum, sitting on the edge of the cold tub, trying to muster up the courage to leave completely. Then the words softly came fluttering into my head. Don't be afraid to fly. Spread your wings. Open up the door. I hummed the melody, which would become Fly Away, the Butterfly Reprise. And I descended the grand stairway for the last time. I truly believed I was going to die in that house I built in Bedford and haunt it forever. I could just see what they'd make of it, a morbid yet festive tourist attraction, the famous ghost of Mariah Mansion, like a tasteful Graceland, where you could hear me hitting high notes in the halls at night. So yeah, it is like really scary, some of the scenes. I think the other year she came out saying that she was bipolar. She's been diagnosed as bipolar since she had that mental breakdown on MTV. So I love that she's come out and said that. But in the book, she never mentions bipolar. She mentions some of the psychosomatic symptoms she's had from, overwork and stuff. But she didn't really mention that. And I think if she had talked about that more, book could have been more powerful. But I think maybe she just doesn't feel comfortable talking about that yet. But I loved how she managed to talk about these really low points in her life that have still inspired her just as much as the happy times. Mariah Carey is, if you don't know who Mariah Carey is, she's famous for her whistling. There's really high octaves that barely anyone can hit with their voice.
What she said, what she did too, can you show me again, sister, please?
Her mother was like an opera-trained singer, so Mariah Carey she's not opera-trained, but she is vocally trained, so she basically could have been an opera singer if she wanted to. Normally it's only opera singers that can hit those high notes and manage it as well as someone like Mariah Carey can. My father taught me to whistle before I could talk. I had a raspy speaking voice even then, and I liked that I sounded different from most other kids my age. My singing voice, on the other hand, was smooth and strong. One day when I was around 8 years old, I was walking down the street with my friend Maureen, who had porcelain-like skin with warm brown hair and a sweet face like Dorothy's from The Wizard of Oz. She was one of the few little white girls in the neighbourhood who was allowed to play with me. As we walked, I began to sing something. She stopped, suddenly, frozen in place on the sidewalk. She listened for a moment in silence, standing very still. Finally, she turned to me and said in a clear and steady voice, "When you sing, it sounds like there are instruments with you. There's music all around your voice." She said it like a proclamation, almost like a prayer. That was lovely to read about. There also was a little bit about how she's religious and is a Christian. So I'd call it more spiritualism than religion, really, but I wanted more of that. Like, she mentions going to Morocco, and she was like, I had a very special spiritual experience here, but she never said what it was. And I wanted to be like, well, this is your memoir. Like, tell me what it is. Like, this is your chance to say what it was. So I don't know why she didn't. Maybe it was some kind of taboo experience that people would laugh at. But I loved hearing her story in her own words. I do think that this memoir as a piece of writing would have been stronger if she'd perhaps gone in thinking of writing several memoirs. So if she'd done what like Maya Angelou did, where she writes like one about her childhood, one about relationships and stuff like that. I felt like that might have worked better for her, because the scenes about the childhood and her growing up and getting into the music business, that was like really, really well rendered. But the later stuff, like everything up until her marriage with Nick Cannon onwards, at the end of the book, she was saying like, I am complete now. And I was like, Mariah, you still have loads of issues. How you say you're, like, she says like she's like eternally 12. So she's basically, I don't know if she has the mind of a 12-year-old. I mean, she doesn't, she seems like adult and sexy and things, but she seems like sexually, she, I don't know. Like, it just seemed a bit off.
I don't picture Mariah having a lot of sex. This is not my first time telling you this. I've never wavered on this. I see Mariah as a DT.
Oh, okay.
Don't you see her? A DT?
Yeah, she's a DT.
Spare me your complaints, lambs, okay? Spare me. I'm still going to talk.
Seemed quite childlike, probably because she had such a traumatic childhood. She wants to relive her childhood all the time. There's only a few gestures where she talks about what her plans are and what her life is like now. Maybe because she is such a world famous superstar, she didn't want to reveal too much about her private life now. I would have loved to read about her now, because when I saw her, not reality show, she says it wasn't a reality show, but it was like her documentary called Mariah's World, that basically was a reality show, and a pretty boring reality show. But when you see the reality show, you see kind of how much of a mess her life still is. Like, she loves drinking all the time, and and her management sometimes isn't up to par at all. She tours a lot, so she's still like very active, and she still makes a lot of music. And I love some of the recent music she's come out with. I love the album Caution. That is one of my favorite albums of 2019. She recently came out with an album called The Rarities. She came out with it this month. It's like some of the songs since her career started off that were rejected from albums. At some point, I want to go through every Mariah Carey album in order and listen to them. So even if you're not a fan or you don't know that much about Mariah Carey, I would recommend this book. But I mean, if you are a fan, this is definitely a must read. I'll probably come back in tomorrow to do a Sunday Reads video. But yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.
Back not 'cause I have to, I want to, and no, I don't just want to have you, I want you.